Hello, my name is David Heredia, and this is my reading reflection vlog on Jesmyn Ward's book, Salvage the Bones. Now, before I make these videos, I like to talk about, the book itself, the context of the book, and the author's history and background, because I feel like understanding those things will really help you contextualize the book and also understand what parts of it make it as good as they are. So I'll talk about that. Jesmyn Ward, I'll start with the author, is the author of the book, and her background is that she is an author born in California and later moved to Mississippi in her life, and lived in Mississippi for a few years, going to school there before becoming a victim of Hurricane Katrina, which passed by Mississippi and hit Mississippi and Louisiana hardest. And she lost her house, her school where she went to could no longer attend. And a few years after Hurricane Katrina happened, Jesmyn Ward wanted the public to not forget as easily the events of Hurricane Katrina and the victims of Hurricane Katrina. And so she released this book, Salvage the Bones, which is about a young girl named Esh, who comes to age, and she becomes pregnant and lives with her family. And her family's preparing for Hurricane Katrina. She has a few brothers named Skeet, Randall, and Junior, who she lives with, and she kind of struggles with her family, familial life, and also with the boys who live in the pit, who one of them, named Manny, is the father of her child, and she struggles with the pregnancy, with family, and Hurricane Katrina. And it's a very well thought out book about them. So enough about everything else about the book. I want to talk about the characters and the setting of the book, because I love the way Jesmyn Ward writes them. They kind of complement each other. So we'll start with the characters. You have Esh, who is the main character, kind of a young woman transitioning from adolescence to adulthood and motherhood because she finds out in the book that she is pregnant. You have her brothers, Junior, Skeet, Randall, and you have her father, who's just named Daddy in the book, but he is kind of an alcoholic, kind of detached from the family. And the way these characters are written is that they're all very flawed. You have her youngest brother, Junior, Esh's youngest brother, Junior, who is kind of self-absorbed. He's kind of childish, immature, which is expected because he is the youngest of the group. You have Skeet, who is very self-absorbed in his dog, not self-absorbed, kind of absorbed in just taking care of his dog. China, who has her puppies, to the point where he kind of disregards himself. He, has very poor hygiene. He only thinks about the dog, really, which is a relationship that's kind of wholesome and kind of also not at the same time. You have Randall, who is probably the most functional of the group. He, is a very hardworking kid. He plays basketball. He's very good at playing basketball, and he kind of is the most responsible of the family. You have, and her father, who is, of course, as I mentioned, a kind of depressed alcoholic, detached from most of the family. And these characters feel very flawed. It's very far from a perfect family, and I feel like that's very much intentional. Jesmyn Ward doesn't want to paint a nice idealistic family in her book. She kind of wants to portray, okay, well, this is how most families are, and it kind of makes the reader kind of sympathize with the characters, because how many of us have perfect families that we can say, oh, we're perfect and nothing ever goes wrong. No, we sympathize with these characters because they're very much like the reader. They you can sympathize with how human they are. The setting also of the book is simply referred to as the pit by the characters in the book, and the pit is a kind of impoverished, kind of low-income area. It's not really the nicest place in the world. It's in Mississippi, so it's hot, it's humid, it's red clays everywhere, and Jesmyn Ward makes no effort to make these areas seem like a nice place to live in. It's very rough. It's very, impoverished. But Jesmyn Ward makes this kind of really real place and kind of really unidealistic place and says, well, here's how these characters live and interact in this area and still manage to kind of entertain themselves, have friends, go to school, have a life. And it uses this to complement Esh's family, Esh's dysfunctional family, by having it in a very also dysfunctional area, and still manages to say, well, hey, this is how, so most people in these areas overcome these. And it also, again, like Esh's dysfunctional family, makes the viewer or the reader sympathize with, okay, most readers don't live in the most perfect, the rich areas. The pit is contrasted with this kind of very nice idealistic home with a blue sky, green grass of the kind of richer people who live in there. And Jesmyn Ward very much uses this to her advantage in the book. The setting and the Esh's family feel like one big character that kind of complements each other, and that's what I really like about Salvage the Bones, and it's what stood out to me the most in this book, and that was the topic of my video, which is why I chose to make this video. I really don't really have much to say, mostly because I like the book. I just felt like most of the symbolism and metaphors went a bit over my head. I finished reading it and I didn't really understand what was going on, which is fine. I'd probably, if I wanted to read it again, I'd probably pick up on a few more things. Just me personally, though. I feel like it, because the way the book is written, it just feels like a recounting of events. The metaphors and similes are there, the symbolism is there. It kind of just flew over my head, though. Maybe I'm not smart enough, but that's what I got from this book, and this is my reading reflection vlog.